For my thoughts on all the latest happenings in the NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format, be sure to check out my channel, JG9 News. And now, on with our feature presentation. One of the golden rules of being a quarterback and being a player in the most marquee position in American sports is that when you win a game, it's because of your teammates. And when you lose the game, it's because of you. When you win, it's because of we. And when you lose, it's because of me. If you had a bad game and your stats were not up to par, and your team lost as a result of it, it is your responsibility as the quarterback and as the de facto leader of the team to own up to it. You play like crap? You let the world know in the post-game press conference when asked, hey, guess what, guys? I played like crap. That one's on me. Seems like an incredibly easy and straightforward thing that shouldn't be too hard to understand, and it seems like a concept that 99% of all quarterbacks understand. Things like, I didn't play well, I let the team down, that one's on me. This is how most quarterbacks react after losing a game. It's just what you do in that situation. So what if I told you a story today about a quarterback who played like crap, and amazingly enough, after the game, threw his teammates under the bus and denied ever playing like crap? What if I told you a story today about a quarterback who didn't have eyes, and who played poorly in a losing effort and genuinely thought that he played good football, and that he wasn't the reason for the loss? Well, the man you've been watching this whole time is Green Bay Packers quarterback David Whitehurst. And in 1979, during a game against the Atlanta Falcons, that's exactly what happened. Because as bad as Whitehurst was on the field, he was a heck of a lot worse off of it when he made some comments and provided some analysis that will make your jaw drop and make you scratch your head. Because this is the story behind David Whitehurst, as in the man who could very well be the most delusional quarterback in the history of the Green Bay Packers franchise. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, we need some context to understand the importance of the game, how it was going, and who the man under center was for the Packers that was responsible for this, despite whatever the heck he might have said or believed. It's October 7th, 1979. It's week 6 of the NFL season, and as we're nearing the midway point of the campaign, we've got an NFC battle on our hands down in Atlanta between the Green Bay Packers and the Atlanta Falcons. For the main team in our story, the Packers, to say that this game was extra important would be putting it lightly. The bad news for the Packers entering is that through 5 weeks, they find themselves sitting below 500 with a 2-3 record, already 3 games back of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the NFC Central lead and slowly slipping behind with each passing week. It's never a good thing to be below 500. But especially back in 1979, when only 5 teams in each conference made it to the playoffs, yeah, you had your work cut out for you, to say the least. In 1978, the previous year, of the 10 teams to make the playoffs, 9 of them had a winning record after 5 weeks. And in the last 6 seasons, only twice in the NFC had a team made the playoffs after being below 500 5 weeks into the season. So the Packers didn't have a ton of room for error, as evidenced by their slow start to the season. The good news, however, was that the Packers had momentum on their side after a shocking victory on Monday Night Football the previous week against the New England Patriots, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. If you won this game, got a winning streak going, and got back to 500, all of a sudden, you would be right in the thick of things again to make it back to the playoffs for the first time since 1972. Lose this game and drop to 2-4? Well, your chances of making the playoffs are awfully slim. And if the Packers were going to have a good game and get back to 500, then they were going to need to have a solid outing from this man right here, their starting quarterback, David Whitehurst. This is not the first time I've talked about Whitehurst on the channel before, as if you want to learn more about him and how his career went in the 1980s, you can do so by clicking the card in the upper right corner. By this point in 1979, Whitehurst had established himself as Green Bay's starting quarterback, beating out Lynn Dickey for the starting job. Now, it's very important to note that despite being a starting quarterback, and despite beating out Dickey for the job, David Whitehurst was not very good at playing quarterback. There had been many great quarterbacks in Packer history, from the likes of Bart Starr to Cecil Isbell to Arnie Herber. David Whitehurst was not one of them, and by this point in his career, Whitehurst had thrown 14 touchdowns and 27 interceptions, with a lifetime touchdown-to-interception ratio of roughly 1-2. That's not good. 5 weeks into the 1979 season, and Whitehurst, once again, was not much to write home about, throwing 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, as Green Bay's offense was rather pedestrian, and that might be generous. For some perspective on where Whitehurst ranked heading into the game we're about to talk about, Whitehurst entered the Week 6 game against Atlanta, ranking 18th in passing yards, 20th in passing touchdowns, and amongst all quarterbacks to attempt at least 1 pass per game, 20th in yards per attempt. On top of that, the Packers ranked last in time of possession, which is partially tied to the play of the quarterback. In other words, if there was a Dalton line back in 1979, David Whitehurst would be that line, where if your quarterback was worse than him, you would need to replace him immediately. So let's just make that very clear going into the game that we're about to talk about. David Whitehurst was not a good quarterback, and he was not playing at a high level. And sure enough, as you can probably tell from all the lowlights you're about to watch, on this day against the Falcons, despite pretty good weather, David Whitehurst looked like David Whitehurst. In fact, considering the fact that Atlanta ended the season with the 3rd worst pass defense in the league in passing yards allowed, and the 5th worst pass defense in the league in getting interceptions, having one of the worst secondaries in football throughout the 1979 campaign, it's even worse than that. When all was said and done, the Falcons blew out the Packers, taking it by a final score of 25-7, winning the game by 3 possessions, and never looking like they were in any danger whatsoever. Atlanta led it 15-0 at one point in the first half. They led it by 2 scores at the halftime break. They didn't allow any points in the second half. They were up by 2 scores after 2 possessions, and they looked as though they were in complete control of the contest the entire way through. And a big reason for that, as you can probably expect based on the score and based on the theme of this video, was the poor play of Packers starting quarterback David Whitehurst. Whitehurst finished the game with just 158 net passing yards, as he could not go through his reads and get rid of the football, taking 8 sacks, including 1 in the end zone for a safety. His deep ball was woefully inaccurate. The Packers went just 3 for 12 on 3rd down, with Whitehurst being largely inefficient and ineffective on that all-important down. And on the day, Whitehurst went 13 for 30, completing just 43% of his passes, with 2 interceptions, a fumble, and a passer rating of 50.6. For some perspective on how bad that is, of Whitehurst's 6 starts thus far in 1979, this was, by far, his worst one from a passer rating standpoint. From a completion percentage standpoint at 43%, the average quarterback in 1979 was completing well over 54% of his passes, so Whitehurst was below the average. And from that passer rating standpoint at 50.6, the average quarterback was posting a passer rating in 1979 well over 70. So again, this was well below the average. By the time the Falcons led 15-0, Whitehurst was 2 for 9. With a minute to go in the first half, Whitehurst had more sacks than completed passes. And to end the game, down the stretch, when the Packers needed Whitehurst to help spark some sort of comeback attempt, however faint it may have been, Whitehurst was 4 for his final 13, ending the game completing 30% of his passes. Long story short, everything about this game, for both the Packers and for David Whitehurst, was ugly with a capital U. And with that in mind, it was time for this man right here that you've been watching, David Whitehurst, after such a disastrous performance, to face the music and answer to the press for his inefficiencies. We all saw it clear as day. Whitehurst played poorly. He was by no means the only reason the Packers lost the game. Chester Markle had a stinker as the team's kicker, going 0 for 2. The defense forced no pressure, only sacking Steve Barkowski one time, and the defense failed to capitalize on some opportunities. But Whitehurst was definitely a big reason, and maybe the biggest reason why the Packers lost. And if Whitehurst spoke to the press after the stinker and said something along the lines of, "I played poorly, and I let my team down and I need to play better," then this is a non-story 45 years later. If Whitehurst gave the traditional and generic boilerplate speak for quarterbacks in this spot, saying, "I didn't do enough to help our team win," or saying, "We didn't do a lot offensively, and you're not going to win too many games in this league playing like that," then fine. It's a complete non-story. I'm not making this video, and you chalk it up to one of those dog bites man stories that is so prevalent and so commonplace that it fails to become a story. However, David Whitehurst did not say that. Because in the eyes of Whitehurst, through all his grand delusion, he thought that he played well. He thought that he played fine. And it was in no way whatsoever his fault that his team lost the game. Seriously. Despite leading an offense that put up just 7 points across 4 quarters against one of the worst pass defenses in football, mind you, despite throwing 2 interceptions, despite a costly fumble in opposing territory, despite taking 8 sacks, and despite playing like garbage in broad daylight, clear as day for everyone to see, Whitehurst spoke to the press after the game and said that he played well, which is just what you want to hear your quarterback say in this spot. Said Whitehurst, "I didn't think I played that bad. I am not worried about my personal performance. I thought I did all right. I'm not saying I played above everyone else. I played just like everyone else." I'm sorry, what? What did you just say? What did you seriously just say there, David? Alright, there's a lot, and I truly mean a lot to dissect with those comments. Number 1, you thought you played alright? You think 13 for 30 with 8 sacks, a fumble, and 2 interceptions in a losing effort is alright? In what world is that alright? In what world is that a good job? What's a bad game for you by that metric then? I guess by his standards, if you even completed 1 pass, you weren't half bad. Dude, you were below the league-wide average in every category during this game. You lost by 3 scores, and your offense was a big reason why. Your play was a big reason why you lost by just about every metric. And that's alright. Today, when a quarterback says that he played alright, he's usually throwing for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in a win, and prefaces it by saying that he didn't play his best, and there were some throws he loved to have back. This game by Whitehurst is the furthest thing from alright. Almost like a baseball player who went 0 for 4 at the plate with 2 strikeouts and an error, saying that he was decent. Clearly, you were not. There are some moments where the numbers lie, but they did not lie here. Not in the slightest bit. You, sir, did not play alright. And number 2, if you're saying that you played like everyone else, doesn't that contradict what you just said? Never mind the fact that a quarterback is supposed to raise the play of his teammates around him and elevate everyone. And by saying that comment, you're basically saying, completely indirectly and without even realizing it, that you are not a good leader and you were unable to do that and perform one of the main duties of being the signal caller. If you said you played just like everyone else, that means that you either played poorly like everyone else, or that you played well like everyone else. If it's the former and you played poorly like everyone else, that goes against what you just said, where you said you played alright. Poor and alright are not the same thing. Not even close. If it's the latter, and you thought you played well, and you thought the rest of your team and your offense played well, then why the heck did you lose by 18 points to the freaking Atlanta Falcons of all teams? If you played well and didn't play poorly, and you were like the rest of your team, then how did you lose by 3 scores and score 7 points against one of the worst pass defenses in football. One of your statements is a blatant lie, and based on your delusions, I don't know which one it is. It's like if your kid says they did alright on the test where everyone knew the material, and they got an F, and they said that they performed like everyone else. That either means that your kid thinks an F is good, or they clearly didn't know the material like they thought they did. One of the statements is wrong. There is a logical reasoning pattern here that does not make any sense whatsoever. And when you consider his comment afterwards where Whitehurst said, "I'm not going to sit here and say I played a bad game. There's a lot going on out there, and the quarterback is either the hero or the GOAT." Yeah, you can tell by those comments that he genuinely thinks he played well in a game where, may I remind you, his team lost by 18 points, scored 7 points total, and where he went 13 for 30 with 2 interceptions, 8 sacks, a lost fumble, and a passer rating barely above 50. The man was delusional. I don't know how else to say it. David Whitehurst was absolutely delusional. And with comments like that, it's no surprise that his days as Green Bay's starting quarterback were numbered, as Lynn Dickey would be starting by the end of the 1979 season, with Whitehurst starting just 3 more games over the course of his career after that. Like I said at the start of the video, when you're a quarterback, one of the first things they tell you is to take the blame when you lose and to not deflect it. And for David freaking Whitehurst of all people to not heed that advice after this game where he put up a staker and played like crap, and for him to genuinely think that he played well, is baffling to me. This was not losing a game like LeBron James in Game 1 of the 2018 NBA Finals. This was not losing a game like Tom Brady at Super Bowl 52. This was losing a game where you were absolutely responsible, where you might have been the main one responsible, and where you couldn't do much of anything right. And you can't even own it? Like, come on. Call it stubbornness, call it outright delusion, call it what you want. But however you want to frame it, on this day in 1979, David Whitehurst, both on and off the field, most definitely did not say the right thing. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.